أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق السبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فتور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خازنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم سمعا والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين. فلما رأوه الزلفى سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. حر کے بیٹے پہ ہی شبیر بہت روئے تھے. حر کے بیٹے پہ ہی شبیر بہت روئے تھے. اب تو لاش علی اکبر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. مارتے ہیں وہاں نیزوں کو زمیں پر ظالم. مارتے ہیں وہاں نیزوں کو زمیں پر ظالم. دفن جس غا علی اصغر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. کچھ قدم دور خدی دیکھ رہی ہے زینب. کچھ قدم دور خدی دیکھ رہی ہے زینب. شمر کے ہاتھ میں خنجر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بے ردا جانا ہے بی بی کو وہاں پر کے جہاں. بے ردا جانا ہے بی بی کو وہاں پر کے جہاں. ہر کوئی دشمن حیدر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بنت زہرا کا کھلا سر ہے خدا خیر کرے. بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
Respected scholar, my elders, brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatih is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Marhamin Al-Fatiha. Ayat Mayyujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. We will recite this together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu su' 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 Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are commemorating Yawmul Gham, also sometimes known as Yawmul Inhidam or Yawmu Inhidam al-Baqi'. So what we wanted to discuss tonight in this day of sorrow or this day of destruction, as it's known. First and foremost, we want to give a general overview of what exactly we're doing tonight. Why is it that we have this commemoration today? What are we commemorating? So in the general overview first, we'll look at the kind of main points that people probably have in the back of their minds. The who, what, where, when, and why, right? We should know what we're doing by gathering tonight. After that, what we wanted to do is go through more of an in-depth analysis and maybe try to extract some points for analysis, right? Some of the questions that we want to try to answer tonight or try to examine to hopefully discuss, that you can all discuss with your family and friends afterwards as well. First is that this day that we call Yawmul Gham, the day of sorrow or day of grief, a day of sadness. Is this day only a day of sadness and sorrow for Shias only? The second thing we want to discuss is, well, what exactly is the significance? If it's a day just for us and we're supposed to feel sad, is there anything else that we're supposed to feel as well? Is there anything else we should understand? And should we do anything besides just mourning and crying? Are we supposed to just remember the events that took place on this day and just feel emotionally attached to it? Or is there something beyond that? And then the final question is, do we have any other events similar to this event in Islamic history? So this is what we would like to discuss tonight, if Allah gives us the tawfiq, inshallah ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So let's do the general overview first. The what and where. What exactly are we commemorating tonight? What exactly happened and where did it happen? So Yawmul Gham, right? This day of sorrow, or Yawmul Inhidam. Inhidam meaning destruction. So something was destroyed. What was destroyed? Tonight we commemorate the razing, the destruction, and the demolition of the graves of 4 of our holy imams who are buried in Jannatul Baqi' in Medina. So these 4 imams, of course, are our 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba, Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, and Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Salawat. So that's the what and the where, right? So it's the destruction of the graves of the 4 imams in Baqi. And of course, Baqi is in Medina. So when did this take place? This took place, technically it took place twice, right? First, in 1806, the graves were destroyed, right? The shrines or the mausoleums above the graves were razed and destroyed. And then again, it happened in 1925 or 1926. The specific date, according to some, is that it was April 21st. According to the lunar calendar, the Islamic calendar, they say that this was, at least when it took place in 1925 or 6, it was approximately the 8th of Shawwal, right, which would be tonight. This is why every 8th Shawwal, every year, we try to commemorate this tragic event that took place. Okay, so we've gone through the what, we've gone through the where, and now we've done the when. Okay, well, who? Who are the people involved in this? Who actually did this? Now, it should be obvious to most of us who have commemorated this event before. Obviously, since we figure out that this took place in Medina, right, in Hijaz, we know the perpetrators for this kind of disgusting event. The main perpetrator, obviously, we would say would be the Saudi king of that time, who was, at least in the 1925-1926 event, who was Abdul Aziz ibn Saud. Basically, he had gotten a fatwa from one of his qada, one of his judges, who was named Qadi Abdullah ibn Bulayhid. So he got a fatwa from him, and based on that fatwa, they destroyed the graves of the imams. So both in the 1806 time that the graves were destroyed and in this 1925 or 1926 occurrence, in both occurrences, it was a combination of 2 parties. The first one were the ones who provided the ideology, were the Wahhabis, and then the ones who actually had the political know-how and the political authority and the force were the Al Saud, right, the Saudi family. Putting these 2 together, right, the deviant theology and movement of the Wahhabis alongside the political tribal power and disgusting nature of the Al Saud family, these 2 combined their forces and 2 times in history went and destroyed these graves. Specifically, a group known as the Ikhwan, the Brotherhood. These were a Wahhabi religious militia that existed during that time. They went and, on behalf of the, at that time, the Saudi leadership, they went and destroyed the graves. Now, of course, we ask why. Why did this take place? What happened? Why did this have to happen? Why did these Wahhabis and Saudis, why they do this? There's a few different reasons we can look at. The first one should be fairly obvious, right, to us. If you know a little bit about Wahhabism, about the Wahhabis, you know what their ideology is. And I'm sure you've heard this before. So the first reason would be the religious reason behind the Wahhabis' theology. For them, they're grabbing their information from figures like Ibn Taymiyyah or his student Ibn al-Qayyim. Now, according to this line of thought, this Wahhabi, Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim line of thought, they believe that graves and having markings and people going and visiting these graves with these markings was a type of idol worship. And they had their evidence in the Quran and the Hadith for why they believed so, right? The other thing was that they said that putting marks, any sort of sign or alama, any sort of signifying mark on a grave was a bid'ah, right? It's an innovation. It doesn't belong in Islam. So we have to destroy all of those things. So this was the kind of Wahhabi theological ideology going into that, right? That's the Wahhabi part. Then you had the socio-political idea. What was a socio-political? Again, this was basically the Al Saud. What did they want to? What did they need to do? Now, there's an idea that exists not just amongst the Sunnis but among the Shias as well. That's sourced in the Quran and the Hadith. And the point is that if you want to show that God is blessing your movement, if you want to show off that you have authority and that it's God-given divine authority, and you want to show that you are the best ones, you're the best suited to be in charge of the Muslim Ummah, then you need to bring some sort of evidence. You need to show that you have the force to do so. So what the Al Saud family wanted to do by using this Wahhabi theology that they were powered by was they wanted to show off their authority. They wanted to enforce their authority and their power. And the way that they wanted to do that was through Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, right? They wanted to command all the things that they believed were good and to prevent and forbid people from what they believe evil and wrong. So where do they get the idea from? It's something that's in the Quran, right? Without going into the tafsir, let's look at the verse. This is in Surah Al Imran, chapter 3, verse 111, where Allah says there, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best ummah that have been taken away or extracted from the people, right? So basically, you're the best people, you're the best ummah. Well, why? What exactly is the quality of this best ummah? What makes somebody so great? The verse continues, تَأْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَلَى الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. So they do what? Amr bil Ma'ruf. They command everybody and they tell them what they have to do, what's good. Then tanhawna 'anil munkar. They tell them and they forbid them from doing what they shouldn't be doing, right? The evil things. Wa tu'minuna billah. And of course they believe and they order people. They believe in Allah. So these three qualities. But again, the two main qualities in the beginning: commanding people to do what's right and forbidding them and preventing them from doing what's wrong. The Saudi family took that. They grabbed the Wahhabi theology, saying that no grave worship, that's idol worship, that's shirk, no markings on the graves. So let's get the fatwa and let's destroy that. So what they're showing to that world at the time is that, look, we know what's good, we know what's evil. We have fatwas from our main qadi, and they also were able to get fatwas from, I believe, 14 other or 15 other main Sunni scholars of that time. After doing that, then they said, look, we have the religious authority and we're going to act upon it. We are going to destroy this stuff which is evil. So this showed the people around the world that, look, they have divine authority then. They're the best ummah because they're acting upon what is good and they're forbidding and stopping people from what's evil. So this is the second reason. So far we've talked about the religious motivation, we've talked about the socio-political motivation, and finally there's a polemical motivation. And what's the polemical motivation? It's simple. It was their message, the Saudis and the Wahhabis, both of their messages to the world, especially the Shias, saying what? Hey Shias, guess what? We win. You lose. We are in control of this holy land. We control the land of the Holy Prophet. We control the graves around the Imams, and we can destroy anything that we want to. And this was the message that they sent. When tensions were high at that point, when the Shia world saw what they were able to do to the graves, these holy graves of the Imams, twice, then in a sense it was a slap in our face. And the Saudis and the Wahhabis were saying, God is on our side, not on your side. So this idea that was being pushed by Shias that, look, we want to unify with the rest of the world, we want to unify with the Sunnis, let's all at least recognize the holiness of the Ahlul Bayt, right? Of especially the four Imams who are buried there. The Wahhabis came and said, look, we destroyed those graves and nobody could do a thing about it. We did it twice and nobody did a thing. So we have authority, we have power, and you Shias are nothing. This was the third motivation and the third kind of effect of what happened after this event took place. This is basically the general overview of what we are commemorating, what happened, the who, what, where, when, and why. Now for the second half of our discussion tonight, I wanted to open up a few more points, right, to go a bit more in depth, back to those three questions that we asked in the beginning. Hopefully we can see if there's some answers that we might be able to reach, or some points that we might be able to think about that we can take with us and discuss with our family and friends after the session tonight, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, first question that we raise is this. Is this event, is this commemoration, is this Yawmul Gham or Yawmul Inhidam, right? This day of sorrow, this day of grief, this day marking the destruction, the Inhidam of the graves in Al-Baqi'. Is this for Shias only? Well, I mean, it should be obvious, right? Based on what we just said, it's the graves of the Imams that were destroyed, right? The graves of our holy four Imams, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. They destroyed those graves. That's a clear attack on the Shias. In their motivations themselves, they, of course, we know the Wahhabi and the Saudi mentality. They're saying that, we Shias are a deviant sect. We're a blasphemous sect. So this was a spit and a slap in our face. So obviously, since we are the main focus of this, or we are the focus of this, then this is an anti-Shia thing. So, of course, this would be only for us then, wouldn't it? This misconception stems from the fact that most of us don't have a full picture, a full historical picture of what exactly happened in both of these events, both of the times the destruction took place, whether it was the 1800s or the one in the mid-90s. You see, it wasn't just the four graves and the four mausoleums and the shrines of the Imams that were destroyed. There were many, many other graves that were destroyed, and there's different numbers that were given. And the graves of the people that were destroyed, once you see the names, you'll see that this is not just something that would break the heart of a Shia, but any Muslim should be upset at what took place. Let me just give you some of the graves, the markings, and the shrines that were destroyed. Firstly, they destroyed the graves and the shrines of the parents of Rasulullah, right? His father, Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib, and his mother, Amina. They destroyed those graves. His uncles, Abbas and Hamza, they destroyed both of those graves. His infant son, Ibrahim, alayhi salam, who is buried in Baqi', they destroyed that grave. They destroyed the markings there. Many of the companions' graves, the ones who, between Sunnis and Shias, we both recognize, and some who are just, let's say, revered by, or more so revered by, the Ahlul Sunnah. For example, Uthman ibn Mad'un. He's somebody that both sects revere. Some say he was one of the very first companions of the Holy Prophet. Malik ibn Anas. He is also buried, according to some, in Baqi'. His grave was destroyed. The third Khalifa, Uthman ibn Affan, they took out his grave as well, and they destroyed that grave. So we have clear examples of figures who are basically more revered in the Shia school of thought, some who we share both in both of our approaches and schools of thought, and then some who are more revered or only revered in the Ahlul Sunnah school. This is not just for us. This is for every single Muslim to recognize that there's a problem here. And in fact, anybody else throughout the world should recognize destroying graves is a disgusting, inhuman act. How is it that any government in the world would allow something like this to happen? Especially those governments which like to claim that they stand up for human rights, right? International rights. Well, what were they doing? When all this was happening, what were they doing? They have no problem traveling to other countries and stopping them from so-called human rights violations. But when the graves of holy figures in a sect, in a religion are destroyed, they are silent. They don't do anything about it. This is one of the main reasons why people come in front of these and do these political protests every year? Because we're saying, why are you being hypocritical, governments of the world? Why aren't you standing up for the rights of the Muslims right now? And why are you supporting this illegal, illegitimate, and disgusting Saudi regime that's existing there right now? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The other misconception that people have is that, again, regarding the issue of whether this is for Shias only, is this. You see, this point about Shia-Sunni unity, what we hear right now in, I'd say, the mainstream media, especially Western media, is that Shias and Sunnis, they've been at odds with each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. We shouldn't get involved. They're just going to fight. That's what they are. It's in their nature. Where did they come up with this? What academic has actually done proper research? Right? Usually you'll find these political pundits or these politicians who have no idea what they're talking about. They're the ones who say these things. We don't find this in history. We actually find the opposite. Shia and Sunni, both the people, the lay people, and the scholars have been united for hundreds of years. It's only because of this recent Wahhabi sort of influence, this Saudi movement that's been happening, this Takfiri movement that's taken precedence now, that's become so prominent. It's after this where now we see that Sunni Shia marriages maybe don't take place anymore. Whereas previously in Iraq, in Iran, in Pakistan, in India, this was a norm. People had there's many different families where there were Sunni Shia marriages. This wasn't an issue. Scholars would study together. Many of our own Shia scholars throughout history would study Sunni fiqh as well. They would get permission, ijaza, to be able to explain and pass fatwas according to their teachers. Meaning, you would have a Shia mujtahid, a Shia ayatullah, who would have permission from a Sunni mufti or a Sunni scholar to be able to explain, let's say, Maliki fiqh, or Hanafi fiqh, or Hanbali fiqh, right? Or Shafi'i fiqh. This was the relationship students used to have. They would leave their home country of Iraq or Iran. They would travel to, let's say, a majority Sunni area, and they would go learn with them because they were after knowledge. And many Sunnis would come and learn under Shias as well. Right? There was no issue there. So this Shia-Sunni unity issue is more of a recent phenomenon. And you see both sides, both extremes, on the Shia side and the Sunni side, they have developed because of these this recent turbulence in the geopolitical world. So we have to be very, very careful with what we're talking about here, right? This idea of grave worship, right, or markings on graves. There was a near unanimous consent among, obviously, Shias, but the majority of Sunni scholars. Why is it for decades upon decades, centuries upon centuries, Sunni scholars had no issue whatsoever with the markings and the shrines being there? Why is it that only twice, in the 1800s and then in the recent time, which was 1925, 1926, why is it that only then the graves were destroyed by this one deviant extremist ignorant sect? Because the Sunnis had no problem. In fact, they were the ones that actually built these in the first place. You see, some of you might ask, why was it built twice, or what happened there? When the Saudis and the Wahhabis first got power in the 1800s, when the Ottomans saw this, again, those of you who have been watching that series, right, Ertugrul, you're seeing the history of the Ottomans, right, to some degree. There, at that point, around the 1800s, there was an Ottoman-Wahhabi war. The Ottomans invaded and wiped out the Wahhabi control, at least in Hijaz. And it was specifically the Sultan Mahmud II who ordered all of the graves, which initially were destroyed, to be rebuilt. Now, he wasn't a Shia, was he? The Ottoman Empire was a Sunni, quote-unquote, empire. He ordered all of these graves and these shrines and these mausoleums to be rebuilt. Right? The majority of the Sunni scholars were the ones initially objecting. And even today, most Sunni scholars object to the rule of the Al Saud. So don't think that this is some Sunni Shia issue. That's not the case. Don't let other people who don't know their history explain to us what happened and what's going on right now. We need to make sure we fully understand our own history, our Islamic Muslim history. Not just the part that suits us. It's not just that the 4 graves of the Imams were destroyed. That it's that Islamic history was trying to be wiped out. this point, this agreed upon unanimous idea in Islam that we can revere our scholars. We can revere the family of the Prophet, his wives, his parents, his uncles. We had these shrines set up and there was no issue. It's only when this deviant sect came up that this change in attitude took place. So we have to be careful that we are not just looking at history through kind of, having this tunnel vision, right? It's not just Shia history for us. We need to make sure we have the full history so we can understand and analyze appropriately. And that means we have to understand we're not going to get a full historical picture from the minbar. We only have 20, 30, max 40, 60 minutes every session. Whenever a speaker or a scholar comes and addresses a community, do you think you're going to get some deep PhD level analysis? It's not going to happen. Why is it that we feel we are able to make opinions on matters, to go and analyze a situation, to go and tell somebody whether what they're doing is right or wrong based on an analysis which is clearly inadequate and insufficient? There are articles and books upon books and volumes upon volumes written about these events, about history, just the events themselves. Then on top of that, you have the analysis of what took place. Why is it that we think that we have the right to go and talk about these things like we are scholars all of a sudden? Without full information, if we start speaking from a place of ignorance, then more likely than not, we'll be doing more harm than good. And it seems like Allah addresses this in the Quran as well. Take a look at what he mentions in Surah Al-Hujurat, right? Verse 12. There he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. Hey, mu'mineen, hey believers. So he's not just talking to regular Muslims now, right? Those of you who think that you are trying to practice what you preach. Those of you who are trying to build up your level of iman. What's the advice here? Ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann. Stay away from these guessing games. Stay away from guesswork and approximation. If you don't have full knowledge, then what? Inna ba'da dhann ithm. Because why? Without a doubt, sometimes this guesswork that you do, this approximation, all these insufficient, inadequate, incomplete ideas and opinions that you have, sometimes they end up what? Ithm. It's a sin. You're actually destroying your own soul because of that. So we have to be very, very careful. And the best thing for most of us, if we're not actually going to take the time to research and read, it's simple. Sukut, as-samt. There's no reason to speak. Let's just be quiet. Why do we have to put our nose and offer our opinion in every single situation? As our Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah alayh says, as he's reported to have said in Nahjul Balagha, the best way to cut off poison in a river from reaching a larger body of water is what? You cut it off. What's the idea? In order for you, your were ignorant words or arrogant words and opinions, in order for that poison to not reach the masses, then stop talking. Just be silent. It's better that we sit and learn from scholars, learn from those who do know. Sit down, go to classes, read. I'm not saying don't ask questions. Do ask. Read, research. But be careful of the guesswork. Be careful of offering opinions when you don't know what you're talking about. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now we have realized that this day is not just grief for us as followers of Ahlul Bayt, but it's a day of grief and sorrow for all Muslims who truly understand the value of those individuals whose graves were destroyed by this disgusting deviant sect. Our second point to discuss. Well, what exactly is the significance then? Let's say we accept now, okay, everybody's supposed to feel sad. We're all supposed to feel this sorrow. Is that it? Do we just remember that, oh man, the Al Saud, they suck. Oh man, the Wahhabis, they're dumb. Is that it? Are we done now? Is it just an emotional exercise? We just feel it personally and that's it? Or should there be something more? In order to try to analyze this, what we want to do is first look at this idea of the concept of gham, right? ghain, mim, and then there's a shadda on the mim, right? So the root letters for gham are ghain and then two memes. What does gham mean? What does gham mean? What's the meaning behind it? So typically when we hear the word gham, especially first in the context of a majlis, we expect a gham bayan, right? Explain to us, clarify for us the grief, the sorrow, the tragedy, the sadness which took place, right? So normally we think of those words. So that's why one of the main meanings for the word gham is what? It's sorrow, grief, tragedy, distress, or anguish. And this is one of the ways that Allah uses it in the Quran. Look at chapter 21, Surah Al-Anbiya, verses 87 through 88. Now, for those of you who you should know these verses, especially if you recite Salatul Ghufayla, right? This is one of the verses that's recited at least in the first rak'ah in place of the second surah. And many of you know that this specific part, right? This story that's being recited is talking about what happened to Nabi Yunus alayhi salam, right? When he was swallowed by the whale. So the verse, as we know, I'm not going to read the whole verse, just the part that is that part that's relevant for us. Where now within the darkness, right? He's in the belly of the whale. He's in that darkness. Yunus now calls out. He does an-nida. He calls out to Allah, right? Fanada fi dhulamat, right? He calls out. He called out in the darkness. What did he say? An la ilaha illa ant. There is no deity. There's no one worthy of worship. There is no entity. There's no reality except ant, except for you, Allah. Subhanak, right? You know, you are beyond what we can describe. We are beyond what we can understand. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. I am among the zalimin. I'm an oppressor. I'm someone who's transgressed and I've done wrong. And of course, this specific part, you know, why is the Prophet saying that? That requires a tafsir. We don't really have time for that, unfortunately, tonight. This was verse 87. Now, how does Allah respond to him in verse 88? Now, if you know the verse, inshallah, you can continue along with me. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. So we responded. We gave jawab to him. We gave jawab to Yunus. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ. And we saved him. We gave him nijat from his gham, from the gham that he had. So we responded, we gave him jawab, and we saved him from his anguish. We saved him from his grief. We saved him from his sorrow, his distress. وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And this is exactly how Allah does nijat and saves the mu'mineen and the believers in the same way. So this is one of the ways that Allah uses the word gham in the Quran, talking about this grief, this sorrow, this sadness, right? This anxiety that we might face in certain situations. There's another way, another derivative of these root letters, ghain and mim, that come in the Quran as well. For those of you who might know the word, aghmam. Alif or hamza, ghain, mim, alif, mim. Aghmam. What is this word? Well, let's look at the verse in Surah Al-Furqan, right? Chapter 25, verse 25. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ بِالْأَغْمَامِ. Or sorry, بِالْغَمَامِ. I said aghmam, it should be ghamam. Or at least in this verse, it's بِالْغَمَامِ وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ تَنزِيلًا. So, talk about or mention the day where تَشَقَّقَ السَّمَاء, that the heavens or the skies are going to be split open and split apart and break open. What are they going to be broken open with? Bil ghamam, with clouds. So aghmam or ghamam means clouds. وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةَ تَنزِيلًا. And then the angels will come down and descend. So this is another way that the ghain, mim root is used, right? It's used to talk about clouds. So you might be thinking, okay, what's the between distress and clouds, right? Maybe you can think, sometimes metaphorically we say, on a cloudy day, I don't feel well. Okay, well, it seems like a connection, but we need to go a bit deeper into this. Let's look at some other derivative words which are used here as well. Another word which is used, it's not in the Quran, but this is also used in Arabic, the word ghimama. Not imama, or not amama, ghimama. Ghimama is the name for that muzzle that they put on the face of, or the head of a she-camel. And they do this, why? to block out the braying, right, or the sound, or the loud breathing or sounds of a she-camel, right, that it makes. Okay, so now we have sorrow and distress. We have a muzzle for a she-camel, and then we have clouds. Well, what is the relationship here? Let me give you another one. In Arabic, we also say غُمَّ الْهِلَالِ. غُمَّ الْهِلَالِ meaning the crescent of the moon, right? Or the moon. غُمَّ الْهِلَالِ is that the moon, somebody would say that غُمَّ الْهِلَالِ, meaning the moon can't be seen. You know, we just passed, obviously. We're lucky that, alhamdulillah, that the moon sighting committee was able to see it, and we had a quote-unquote unified Eid, whatever that means. But sometimes he would say غُمَّ الْهِلَالِ, we can't see it, right? Meaning what? That it's blocked and obscured. It's hidden from us. This is one of the main meanings of gham and ghum. Is what? It's something that's being hidden, it's being blocked, and it's being obscured. So this is one of the general meanings that's used. So now you can understand. All right, so ghum al-hilal, that means that the moon is being obscured from our vision. It's being blocked from our vision. Ghimama, that it's what? A she-camel, that muzzle is blocking them from speaking and making, so it's obscuring and blocking their sounds. The aghmam or ghimam, clouds are blocking the light from the sky or the suns, right? That's what a cloud does. And of course, what do they say for the gham, meaning sorrow or grief? They say gham wal qalb, is that there's something that's blocking our heart. There's something that's covering up our heart. Now, what exactly is that? That's the next part of our discussion. We want to go into the original, deep spiritual meaning behind the idea of gham, which is what? We'll say that after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The deep original spiritual meaning of gham is what? It's anything which obstructs, which blocks, which covers or obscures something that illuminates. And anything that illuminates as well. So, for example, anything which blocks light is going to be referred to as gham or aghmam. If you block the truth, because the truth is illuminating, that's gham as well. If you block somebody's happiness, then that leads to what? Sorrow. So that's gham in your heart. If you block somebody witnessing beauty, then that also becomes gham as well. Now we can see how all of these meanings tie together to that original spiritual meaning, right? So when we have this ghamul qalb, when we're talking about what should we be feeling today, there's obviously first the ghamul qalb, this sorrow or depression or sadness that we feel is because of what? It's an emotional, spiritual, and even an educational connection. How so? Well, because it obscures and it covers our happiness. We are being blocked from the people that we love the most, the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam. When their graves are being destroyed, that beauty that they have, that the shrines that were put above their graves, that beauty that we saw, that they deserve to have these kind of shrines, that was being knocked down. So of course we're going to feel sorrow at that. Of course we're going to feel personally attacked. Of course our hearts will feel like they're being kept away from happiness. But on top of that, when people are not able to recognize the beauty of the shrines of the Ahlul Bayt, which is a way, a wasila, and a medium for them to look at the beauty of the actual people behind that grave, the personalities of the Ahlul Bayt, then what is this also doing? It's blocking people from the truth. A pedagogical or an educational gham. You're blocking them from light. You're blocking them from the representatives of Allah. You see, we said that before. Throughout history, nobody had an issue with this. People revered the Ahlul Bayt. That's why both Sunnis and Shias would revere the Ahlul Bayt together, and these shrines were built together. Right? And again, the Sunni Ottomans were the ones who rebuilt the shrines the first time. But you see how a small group, a minority group, through their distorted ideology, can destroy the unity of a community. They can destroy the unity and the peace and tranquility of an ummah. And a point for us to reflect on is this. Beware and be very, very careful of minority and fringe groups that try to viciously attack the mainstream and orthodox views which exist within a community. Now, just because a person believes in let's say, an unorthodox or minority opinion or view, it doesn't mean they're wrong. But it means that, look, we have to be careful. especially if they're going to be very, very vicious, and especially if they're not really offering strong evidence. And again, especially if, as we said before, they're not scholars themselves, right? And we know that even among our own school of thought right now, as followers of Ahlul Bayt in our own communities, we have people who, believe in certain things which are not part of our mainstream orthodox view. And we see these examples in our communities right now. They'll come and say, hey, this dua is inauthentic. Stop reciting it. This ziyarah is not found in the books. Get rid of it. Stop reciting. Why are you coming and trying to destroy the source of happiness for other individuals? If you want to have an academic civil discourse, then okay, do that. But why are you coming in this arrogant manner and trying to destroy the source of light and happiness for other individuals? Who gives you the right to come and go against the mainstream and orthodox view? Let the scholars discuss that, or if you want to be educated, then fine, do so. But why so vehement? Why so vicious? And why so arrogant against other groups, especially the mainstream group? There's probably a reason why the mainstream orthodox opinion has existed for so many hundreds of years. Now, maybe it was wrong, it's possible, and maybe it can be corrected. But do you think by listening to one scholar or a few scholars, or reading a few articles or a few books, without deeply going into these studies, you automatically now have access to the truth and you can go and tell people that what they're doing is wrong? This is very, very dangerous. Again, that's an advice to those in the fringe group, in the minority group. And now, those of us who, let's say, believe in the orthodox and mainstream views, we also have to say, okay, we recognize that there are people who have these, quote, not deviant, but these non-mainstream views. Okay, if I am not able to discuss things with them, if they're going to be vicious against my beliefs, or if they want to engage in a discussion, stop trying to defend the beliefs if you don't have the proofs. Let the ulama discuss this stuff, that what they've been doing. These discussions which people are having right now in the centers and on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter, people in the Hawza have discussed this already. These discussions are pretty much done, most of them. But now, because a few lay people have gotten wind of them, now they want to start arguing amongst themselves. And most of the time, and I've sat in a lot of these discussions, of both the people who believe in the orthodox and both people who are not orthodox, neither group seems to know what they're talking about. So what do they end up doing? Instead of actually discussing it in an academic, educational way, they end up just attacking one another. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an enemy of the Ahlul Bayt. No, what are you saying? You're anti-human rights. Look, if you can't have a civil discourse, say salam to each other and part ways. That's the best thing that you and I can do in that situation. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the final point which we want to end on tonight before we recite a few words of masa'ib and gham is this idea here. Do we have any other events similar to this in Islamic history? And based on the way that we've been describing this tonight, the answer should be an easy, categorical yes. It should be obvious to us that this event which took place twice in history, the destruction of the graves, the various graves of these revered personalities, these events, what do they mirror? They mirror the events of Karbala. What do we have in Karbala? We have a fringe group, a minority group, destroying the unity of the Muslims at that time, who we could even say were barely even Muslims to begin with. Right? They claim to believe in the Prophet. They claim to follow the Prophet's teachings, but you see that their spiritual diseases had led them to murder the family of the Prophet and his close companions. And they did this to what? Obscure and block the truth from the rest of humanity. And this is why people still to this day say, don't talk about history. Don't bring this up. Why? Because they don't want people to know the truth about what happened then and what were the events that led up to Karbala. Because that will make them question their own aqidah, their own theology, and their own history. And look at what happens right now. You have people who say, no, don't talk about Baqi. It's a divisive thing. How is it divisive? The graves of the Ahlul Bayt were destroyed, who are revered by all of us, and the graves of companions, and the parents, and the uncles, and the son of the Prophet was destroyed, and the wives of the Prophet were destroyed. This is something that should bring us together. In the same way, we want to examine how in the world did this happen? How did we get to al-Baqi, of Yawm al-Baqi, of Yawm al-Inhidam al-Baqi, of Yawm al-Gham? How did we get there? Examine history. This is a point for us that we can work together, and we can trace back, if we want to, how something like this was able to take place. And we, of course, reflect also on the tragic events which took place in Karbala, and our heart goes to the events of Karbala. And we say, Mawla, heart is with you. And whenever we hear about the tragic events in Karbala, our heart breaks all the time. You see, of course, we feel this sorrow and this grief based on what happened on this day, right, to the graves of the Ahlul Bayt and everybody in Medina, in Jannatul Baqi. Mawla, one thing that you have that your family doesn't have, the other Imams don't have, is Alhamdulillah, we are lucky enough that we can go to your shrine now. We have set things up through our efforts, and now we can go and pay our respects to you, to your brother Abbas. We can go to Karbala, we can grab your dhari, we can grab your shrine, we can shed our tears, and we can feel that closeness to you. But still to this day, because of what these disgusting individuals have done, when we go to Baqi, we are blocked from going to our beloveds. We are blocked from going to the graves, just the graves of the people that we love so much. But we say that there's something that's even worse than that. Yes, we can go to the grave of Imam Hussein, we can go to the grave of Abbas, we can go to the graves of the other Imams and the shrines of all the other Imams that are there. But there's one thing that breaks the heart of every single Shia and should break the heart of every single Muslim, including all the other followers of the Prophet. And that's, where are we able to sit down and cry for the beloved daughter of Rasulullah? Where do we go to sit down and shed tears for Fatima Zahra? We don't have a shrine for her. We have no grave for her. We have no marking for her. Because of what took place in history, the crimes which took place against her, all we can do is claim and ask Allah, Ya Allah, please show us something. Please give us a place where we can go and express our grief and our sorrow for our beloved Sayyidah Fatima alayha salam. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, चली है मांगने हक फातिमा रसूल के बाद, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, रसूल ज़ादी खरी क्यों रही सरे दरबार, रसूल ज़ादी खरी क्यों रही सरे दरबार, ये कौन तख्त पे बैठा रहा रसूल के बाद, चली है मांगने हक फातिमा रसूल के बाद, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, सितम की हो गई ये इंतहा रसूल के बाद, وہ جا کے شہر سے باہر پدر کو روتی رہی، وہ جا کے شہر سے باہر پدر کو روتی رہی، کسی نے گھر میں نہ رونے دیا رسول کے بعد، چلی ہے مانگنے حق فاطمہ رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی یہ انتہا رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو انتہا رسول کے بعد، وہ جرم کیا تھا کہ جس پر علی کو گلیوں میں، وہ جرم کیا تھا کہ جس پر علی کو گلیوں میں رسن سے باندھ کے کھینچا گیا رسول کے بعد، چلی ہے مانگنے حق فاطمہ رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی یہ انتہا رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی یہ انتہا رسول کے بعد، شکستہ ہو گیا کیسے بطول کا پہلو، شکست ہو گیا کیسے بطول کا پہلو، بتاؤ ظلم یہ کس نے کیا رسول کے بعد، چلی ہے مانگنے حق فاطمہ رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی یہ انتہا رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی یہ انتہا رسول کے بعد، کوئی بتائے ہمیں کیوں رسول کے گھر سے، کوئی بتائے ہمیں کیوں رسول کے گھر سے، ہمیشہ رونے کی آئی صدا رسول کے بعد، چلی ہے مانگنے حق فاطمہ رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی ہے انتہا رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی ہے انتہا رسول کے بعد، چلی ہے مانگنے حق فاطمہ رسول کے بعد، ستم کی ہو گئی ہے انتہا رسول کے بعد۔ فاتحہ۔
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلهي أذن البلاء وبرئ الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وضاقت العرض ومنيت السماء وأنت المستعان وعليك المشتقى وعليك المعول في شدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذين فرزت علينا تعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم، ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب يا محمد يا علي يا محمد. اقفياني فإنكما كافيان، وانصراني فإنكما ناصران يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان. الغوث الغوث الغوث، أدركني أدركني أدركني. الساعة الساعة الساعة، العجل 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 يا أرحم الراحمين، بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى ابن مولى، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا سلطان أبو الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.